Hello and welcome to this digital transformation webinar in partnership with Konica Minolta, Quocirca, Papercut and Intuitive. I know there might still be a few people signing on, but we will make a start as we're aiming to get finished within the hour and get you back onto your next meeting or your lunch break or whatever you're doing next. My name's Catherine Kennedy and I'm the Head of Sales and Marketing at Intuitive. I'd like to introduce our panel of experts, all who've got extensive experience in the industry. Firstly, Louella Fernandes, who's the Director of Quocirca, the leading analyst in the print industry. We're also pleased to have with us today Mark Ash, who's the CRO at Konica Minolta UK, Stu Brookes, who's the Head of Channel and Alliances for EMEA at Papercut, and lastly, but no means least, Roger Stocker, my CEO. We're a business analytics specialist, and that's Intuitive Business Intelligence. Today, we're going to be thinking about where the opportunities are for business process transformation, which will be essential as we all start to come out of the COVID pandemic. We'll also be thinking about whether an understanding of the data in our organisations could be the key to identifying digital transformation opportunities. But first, let's just cover a couple of housekeeping points. The webinar is going to be recorded and it will be sent to everybody who's registered for today. We're aiming at about 40 minutes or so of presentation and discussion with some time for questions from the audience at the end. So please put any questions that you have into the question function on the webinar platform. We might not get to answer all of the questions today, but we will still be logging them all and we will provide written feedback afterwards if we've got more questions than we can get to this afternoon. So to kick us off and help to set the scene, I'm going to ask Louella to talk first and just give us a quick summary of the key trends that she's seeing for 2022 that relate to the topics that we're discussing today. So over to you, Louella, thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. So Quocirca has published 10 trends, which you can see there now, which we expect to represent key opportunities for print and digital intelligence in 2022. This year will certainly be one of further transition and change as organisations look to manage the complexity and challenges around hybrid working. Today we're talking about digital transformation and clearly companies have been on this path for some time, but over the past 2 years, digital transformation has really taken on a new urgency and become integral to future-proofing any business. So if we think about digital transformation in 2022, the key drivers I want to focus on are how businesses will be looking at resilience, sustainability and security in terms of reducing risk. And from a technology perspective, it's automation, analytics and cloud, which will be fundamental to effective digitisation. So we can see the 10 trends that we highlighted. I've only got 5 or so minutes, so I'm just going to focus on a few trends that we really believe are key to shaping the print infrastructure landscape over the coming year. So firstly, I want to focus on hybrid work and how that will spur transformation of distributed print and hybrid workflows. So our research has shown that hybrid work is here to stay, with around 65% of employees wanting to mix home and office working. And this doesn't actually mean that the office is no longer relevant. It's just perhaps not relevant 5 days a week. The focus of the physical office will absolutely be to foster collaboration, creativity and social interaction. So what does this mean for printing? We don't expect print volumes to return to pre-pandemic levels. Certainly the pandemic has led to permanent changes in behaviour for many things across the spectrum, and printing habits are changing. Many organisations may still be reliant on printing to some extent, but this is certainly diminishing over time as digitisation efforts are accelerating. So to unlock the benefits of hybrid working, organisations will need to ensure that, for example, print and digital technologies are consistent in terms of employee experience, regardless of where that employee is located. So what does this mean for managed print services, for example? So organisations need to evaluate MPS and look at how they can use their MPS provider to manage the home and office print environment. And this means really managing a secure and hybrid and agile print infrastructure. This again means re-evaluating of existing MPS contracts that fit for purpose. For example, does a more distributed print environment suit companies that are operating at lower capacity rather than a centralized print model? Essentially, is the MPS fit for purpose, scalable and future-proofed to adapt to further changes in the market? Part of this is really understanding analytics. Can an organisation track and monitor print usage and even scan usage across the hybrid workplace? So really, as organisations accelerate their digitisation initiatives, flexible and scalable and integrated print and capture solutions will be key to driving employee productivity and workplace productivity. The second trend I want to highlight is really about sustainability. So sustainability has always been on the agenda, but what we're seeing and what we expect to see in 2022, that this has become more of a priority for many organisations, regardless of size. Particularly for large organisations, there's a range of ESG initiatives underway as companies move to net zero targets. And really many organisations are now seriously looking at how they can lower environmental impact. One area that many organisations are now focusing on is to reduce wasteful printing and accelerate initiatives around paper digitisation, so ultimately automating their business processes. And this can be achieved through a number of ways, but absolutely key and fundamental to any sustainability initiative is really understanding a company's carbon footprint and their environmental impact. And data analytics and reporting, along with circular products and services, carbon footprint reporting and process automation are all key to reducing environmental impact. So this could be using IoT sensors to look at smart building functionality and how that can actually be tracked in terms of environmental footprint, but also looking to cloud-based platforms which actually can unlock new opportunities for measuring and monitoring environmental impact. And when it comes to printing, you're looking at secure print solutions, which are not only helping reduce risk, but also minimize wasteful printing. And in addition, print management solutions can actually look at the whole of the print infrastructure to identify opportunities for better device utilization and improved energy efficiency. So sustainability is one of the key drivers for digital transformation as we move further into 2022. Our research has shown that 57% of organisations expect their supplier to adopt a leading position around sustainability. So it's not only how a company has their own sustainability initiatives, but it's also how the actual customer is actually benefiting from those solutions. So for example, MPS can really help organisations reduce their environmental impact, whether it's energy consumption, consumables usage and recycling. So MPS has a very important role to play there. I also wanted to touch on the Great Resignation, which will increase the use of workplace analytics to improve employee experience. So with the move to hybrid working, many companies are now facing an exodus of employees who are re-evaluating their work-life or life-work balance. With almost 70% of workers wanting a hybrid model post-pandemic, employers really need to offer flexible working options and also maintain and improve employee workplace productivity. So to attract and retain talent, it means understanding and gaining insights into employee productivity and really helping those employees be better engaged and more productive. So analytics, again, key to actually understanding and helping improve employee productivity and engagement. The last trend I want to talk about briefly is how advanced analytics will very much unlock digitisation opportunities. And this is really the theme of today's discussion. When we run our surveys with IT decision makers, around 50% of organisations say that MPS will be very important to their digital transformation initiatives in 2022. Predictive analytics plays a key role here in turning disparate customer data into coherent insights. And this really means that MPS providers can uncover further revenue opportunities for digital workflow automation services. So one example is understanding an organisation's position in that digital transformation journey, understanding where you are in terms of digital maturity, and based on that data, looking for opportunities to make small wins from certain business processes, which can actually then further improve operational efficiencies going forward. So with that, that were the main highlights of our predictions. If you want more information on those, we do have those on our website. But for now, I'd like to hand back over to Catherine to open today's discussion.
That's great. Thanks, Louella, for that great introduction. I think that's been really helpful in terms of setting the scene. Obviously, over the last 2 years, we've seen huge challenges to all organisations, large and small, with dealing with all of these different set of circumstances. I'd just like to start by asking really what the key challenge for your business has been during that time and how you've adapted, and whether you expect things to stay as they are now, or are you expecting to go back to how we were pre-pandemic? I'll come to you, Stu, first on that question. You work for a global organisation, and maybe you've got great perspective on that to start the discussion with.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. I think quite obviously, the key challenges is that for Papercut as an organisation, we're linked to hardware ultimately. So hardware slows down, there's always therefore a domino effect of those software organisations around us. That said, we saw two different changes within that pandemic, within this pandemic period. We saw an increase in micro SMB and SMB business. So the smaller end of the market actually wanted to understand more, now wanted to start to get control and visibility of what they were doing. At the other end of the scale, and we all saw this, larger organisations were no longer in office. Deals were pushed out, deals were delayed, deals were much smaller. So we saw, for us also, we saw growth at the bottom end, we saw some push down at the top end. And I think moving forward, what we certainly have already started to see probably within the last 3 to 6 months, as in different parts of the globe, businesses start to return to some form of hybrid working, we're starting to see more, for those larger customers, reduction in fleet sizes. We're anywhere from 10, 20, up to 30%. We're now seeing them as they become more hybrid, as people don't work from home, you need less devices. And that, I think, is going to be an interesting challenge for that large accounts and enterprise level market. But I think it presents opportunity at the SMB end. So I think we'll see a change maybe in the demographic of customers and opportunity size. But at the same time, I think, there are still newer challenges on the horizon. None of us foresaw the pandemic quite clearly. And whilst we're now coming out of that issue, we've gone through, the chip issues and the hardware supply chain issues that saw, we get feedback globally, that actually we've also now got container issues that are stopping, flow of stock out of the Far East into Europe as well. We've sort of seen this perfect storm in the last 2 years, which has been difficult for all of us, and I don't think we'll ever get back to where things were. It's now about who is going to be able to streamline and adapt to a slightly new market moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Stu. I think I'll come to you, Mark, next. As somebody that's been steering quite a large ship through these stormy waters, to use the sort of continue with the analogy, what's your experience been over the last couple of years, and the sort of key challenges and how you've adapted?
Thanks, Catherine. And as Stu said, we didn't see it coming, and therefore we weren't prepared. And the reality is, I've not yet met anyone that did see it coming. And if anybody says that they did see it coming, then they're either very, very intelligent with the gift of foresight, or they're a liar. The reality is, even if we had a plan, as a military commander would say, most plans don't survive first contact with the enemy. For us, it was relatively easy to fix the IT and the challenges a lot of people face working from home, because we're an IT service provider. The bigger challenge for us is that we were going through org transformation on an unparalleled scale. And the majority of people onboarded during the pandemic had never met each other. So they'd worked together, the entire board changed during that time. And the big challenge, as Stu finished up on, is the state of flux continued and actually increased through the pandemic as opposed to tailed off. So for us, it'd be nice to have some flatter seas to navigate. We touched on the supply chain challenges, that it's not just particular to our industry, but all industry wide, with semiconductors, toner, as well as Brexit. I think for us, the only way is forwards, and we don't expect to go back, as Louella said. So our challenge now is how we help our customers to quickly adapt to those changing conditions to both survive and thrive. But also it's a case of navigating the peaks and the troughs. Every time Rishi Sunak or Boris steps up on television, we don't know what tomorrow will bring. And downturns in businesses has affected workforce, initially with furlough, then redundancies, and now with the Great Resignation. So actually, we've seen businesses look to our outsourcing offering to really help those manage the peaks and the troughs, as that's somewhere where we can offer a flexible labour model to help them get through it.
Thanks, Mark. And Roger, I'll come to you next. As we're a slightly smaller business than Konica, but I think there's still been some similar challenges and maybe some slightly different ones as well that we've encountered.
Yeah, absolutely, Catherine. Looking back on it, we just launched a brand new product into the managed print services market at the end of December 2019. To find 3 months later, the whole world had changed. And looking back on it, you forget how quick it all happened. So I remember being away in Paris on the 4th of February, which is the first time I heard about COVID. And people were talking about this thing happening in China. I think by the 6th of March, it was a worry. And then by the 20th of March, we're in lockdown. So if you think about it, that was only 44 days from first hearing about it to the world changing, or 14 days from I knew there were some changes to come into to everything changed. I think, like with everybody, the first couple of months were chaos because we were having to react, our partners were having to react, their customers were having to react. But then really by June time, things had settled down. And while individual partners weren't growing like we expected and some revenue were down, a number of our partners increased massively. So the business was remarkably resilient. And I think we were lucky because we knew we were going down an international route with our product. We'd invested in delivering things digitally. And if we hadn't have done that, it would have been far harder. I think for me, the things which have been harder are the longer term issues. So, staffing issues, whether that be burnout or a member of staff having to suddenly disappear for 3 weeks because they've got homeschooling or children off sick. As Mark and Stu mentioned, really the whole semiconductor issue sneaked up on us. So, coming in June, I thought the only way was up, and then we've had a major change again. And we've had to bring new employees on. We've got a lot of graduates, and we've had to bring them on and mentor them, and it's their first job in their career. And trying to do that remotely has been hard. But I think Mark hit on the point. Actually, we use Mark services. We use outsourcing extensively because the thing we've learned is we've got to be flexible in our approach to business, and we've got to be able to scale up, and we've got to be able to scale down as the market changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Roger. I think moving on from that, and I think there's been such a lot of debate, hasn't there, about the return to work, return to the office rather than return to work. We've all been working, haven't we, just in different places, and the continuation of hybrid working. So I wonder what you maybe see as the future of the office going forward, and what opportunities or issues arise from that hybrid working that I think maybe, based on what Louella said right at the beginning as well, we think is definitely going to be continuing going forward. Mark, you've obviously got a lot of staff members, a lot of colleagues in your business. So how do you think it's going to impact your business, and what do you see that looking like going forwards?
I think it's a great question, and it's a question that a lot of people are asking at the moment, Catherine. We personally at Konica Minolta, we're in a good position pre-pandemic because we had already adopted hybrid working. The pandemic, though, has highlighted the need to focus on 3 things: collaboration, security, and productivity. Now, let's be clear, hybrid and agile choice-based working is here to stay, except for a few well-publicised financial institutions where they're mandating you've got to be back in the office. And it's really changed our collective mindset. And even some of my consultant friends in the NHS, they've realised they can be more productive with their clinics via Teams and have a better work-life balance, because you can move from one person to the next person to the next. And indeed, the work-life balance benefits of working from home, they can be quite profound. And that's really changed our relationships with our office space. But conversely, we also need to manage people's mental and physical health. As some people are not as fortunate as we are, they don't have home offices, so therefore the remote workers are utilising the same space to work from that they do in their personal lives. I think the key with hybrid working is to offer choice to people and then allow them to make that choice themselves. And the challenge is about how do you make the hybrid model work if you weren't set up to work this way? But as Sachi and Adela said, the pandemic's really only caused digital acceleration that's going to happen anyway. And we're here to help our customers in this area and understand how we help to collaborate better. And part of doing that is really providing up-to-date information to our colleagues remotely so that they feel equally engaged as those colleagues that are in an office.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mark. I sort of really agree with you on sort of that, some of those points, the future, and you know, hybrid and home working and office is definitely the way going forward. What struck me though was we were one of the first companies to reopen the office, and when we reopened, we were absolutely inundated with visitors and partners wanting to come and visit us. And you forget, I think, how important the office is in terms of a few things. As you said, working from home is not always ideal. You know, we had times when I had my kids moved back in, 4 of us working from home, trying to navigate kitchens, lounges, homes, office. It was difficult. And then for other people, you know, we've had some people come in who've come in and said, I've literally not seen anybody in a work environment for 18 months, and that's tough. Things we've noticed, I think for us is actually it's far easier to be creative and collaborate in the office. So transactional reviews, things like that are very easy to be done remotely, but bouncing around new ideas, which is the lifeblood of our company, is hard to do remotely and a lot easier in the office. And as I touched on earlier, for us, we've got a lot of people at the start of their career, and they need to be around more experienced people who can give them that informal feedback and mentor them.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, is something to be said about Intuitive's collaborative nature, Roger, because indeed my first appointment out of lockdown, I remember it well because it was with yourself. And I remember sitting there actually looking at someone in the eyes, and it felt unusual, albeit it's something we've done for most of our lifetime. But I think the key difference is if you look at organisations that are not set up to work that way. A classic example is last week I received an email from British Airways CEO, and he wrote to all of its customers apologising for the suboptimal customer experience. And he said, and I quote, "To be frank, we've been moving from one set of restrictions to another. And the amount of change we've been dealing with over the past couple of years from week to week has been relentless. I'm not seeking to make excuses for things that should have gone better." And I think what that really shows up as work from home is throwing up a lot of issues around collaboration and security, as well as the customer experience. Now, in an office, it's easier for him to control that information, but he sees the home office as a security risk, and therefore the customer experience is impacted. We have to see home offices as an extension of the general office environment. And then, like Roger said, the office spaces have now become about collaboration and social experiences. I know a number of my sales teams have enjoyed spending time in your space. Now, if people are going to go to the office and other people are in lockdown or self-isolating or in quarantine, we need them to work virtually so people can be there and people can not be there at the same time. It can't be one or the other. I think if we look outside at some well-known examples, Google's spending $1 billion on the UK offices. It's just an incredible amount of money. But there's companies that have been growing exponentially. People like Softcat have known for some time that having collaborative spaces that are fun to be in, then it will grow exponentially. And yes, it meets their and fits their demographic, but for all of us, we are social animals. The big challenge a lot of people don't realize is it's hard for us to move to some of the operating models like companies with deep pockets like Google have done. The challenge is the real estate model has been built around long-term leases of 10, 15, 20 years. Many organisations are locked into properties that they no longer need and often not fit for purpose.
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to come to you now, Stu, because I think you've actually adapted some of your product features, haven't you, or been able to take advantage of those to really help with hybrid working. Maybe you'd just like to add a comment on that?
Yeah, the whole piece I think has been well covered by Mark and Roger, but I think what we see is the key now in the work environment piece, whether that be your home office or your office, is the balance around productivity and security. You know, and there's two primary use cases that we get spoken to quite often. You know, I'm working from home, and I, as a user, need to expense, you know, my work-related printing that I might be doing back to my employer, and I need to validate that. I need to show what I'm printing so I can put that through on expenses, claims, etc., etc. Or we've seen that tendency where some employers have actually pushed devices out to users who do need to print, and they want to track what's going on, and you've also got security issues around that, because actually, do I want, you know, if I'm using a device at home and it's printing personal stuff as well as work stuff, there's a security and personal information balance to switch between the two. And I think we're fortunate at Papercut, nothing at all to do with COVID. You know, we brought our mobility print feature to market 4 years ago, maybe. And that was all aimed at BYOD environments and mobile workforces. So this adaptation to now, I want to work from anywhere, be that home, be that a coffee shop, be that, you know, the office, wherever, that ability and some of those features we've seen huge take up of in the past two years because of COVID and because of the way that people need to adapt. And I think ultimately that's the biggest challenge everyone will have. Again, it's how do we adapt? How do we adapt to someone working in multiple places on different days of the week and still being able to provide a service to that user?
Yeah, absolutely agree. So I think I'm going to move on to our next question, which is really linked. Obviously, I think we're all agreeing that hybrid working is definitely here to stay, and it has changed how organisations are operating. So I guess I'm interested in your views on, you know, the increased investment that we have seen and the acceleration in digital transformation, and really getting an understanding of what we're seeing from customers on their digitisation journey. Perhaps, Louella, I could come to you first on this one.
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, digital transformation has been really crucial to a lot of organisations over the past year, and it is a very kind of nebulous term and touches on the use of many digital technologies. But I think really what we're going to see now is that organisations, in their rush to digitise a lot of their operations, are now looking at how to manage that complexity, and, you know, potentially looking at outsourcing and managed service providers to actually help support their organisations going forward, particularly through the use of cloud. And I think with digital transformation, a lot of it is also down to change management. So when you change processes, how do you actually manage that in an organisation internally? And, you know, really there's not one kind of size fits all approach with digital transformation. It really is a kind of phased approach. And, you know, there are opportunities, as we've discussed earlier, around how you can unlock opportunities from digitising sort of some simple paper-based processes, and actually, which are very manual-based as well, and actually improving efficiencies and, you know, ultimately reducing cost as well associated with those processes. So I think that investment is going to continue, but I think there's also challenges in how to actually tackle some of those key areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, I think at Konica, you're very much doing quite a lot, aren't you, to help your customers assess where they are on that digital transformation journey, and then work out how you can support them in that. So yeah, over to you to maybe explain and talk to that point a little bit more.
Yeah, we are, Catherine. And as Louella says, there isn't a one size fits all. And many companies, they simply don't know where they are on that digital maturity spectrum. The reality is, with the significant acceleration in digital transformation, people were just thrown into the deep end. They didn't have a choice. And most of our customers now, they've had to react to this new working life and make quick decisions to ensure business continuity. The challenge with quick business decisions is, whilst there is an element of business transformation, it's relatively unplanned and often a little chaotic. So as we're coming out of the lockdown now, we need to understand where the customers are in that journey to maturity, and then help them take a more strategic look at their own digital transformation. And as I said, the key is to understand, where are you now? Now, numerous studies have shown that the different sectors are at different timescales with their transformation, and one size doesn't fit all. Even within sectors, you can have a large banking institution that existed for hundreds of years, or you can have Starling Bank that's built for digital. we've got and developed a tool really as part of this process to help people. We've got a DX360-degree digital maturity assessment, and it really helps you to understand if you've got the tools, the procedures in place, and then it helps identify your digital transformation strategy. It takes less than 10 minutes, but once completed, you're instantly going to get a customized report to your business via email, and it will have recommendations for you on how to improve your digital maturity model score in the areas that you need it.
That sounds really helpful, and I think you're right. People need to take stock a bit of where they are now before they can decide what to move on to next. Absolutely. Roger, I think you've got a couple of points to add on this with just a couple of sort of anecdotal experiences of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. I think lots of people have put this basic infrastructure in to allow people to work from home, and they think that's it, great, we've digitized it. And I see some really, really good examples of where companies have embraced it. And so a good example, I live in an old property. Just last week, I needed to get a boiler, so I went on for a call with E.ON. They had to come and do a survey, so I was expecting someone to come out. No, it was done by a WhatsApp call where I walked around the house, we took photographs of the house. I then got the forms online, and it was all done in 15 minutes. So rather than me having to wait at home all morning for someone to turn up, it's more convenient for me. It was lower costs for the supplier because they can get loads more done. A win-win. But I'm seeing lots of other areas. The front office has been automated, but the back office isn't. And actually, the deal online, your expectation is, because I'm input into the process online, you expect an instant response. And whether that's been I've just done something with the local council where I filled a form online. 2 weeks later, I got a printed document back through the post. Or I'm dealing with a replacement printer where I'm dealing with a chatbot, and I'm 6 months in at the moment, but I'm not going to let it defeat me. So I think there's great examples, but I think for a lot of organisations, they've made those first steps, but there's a lot further they can go.
Absolutely. And I think given this background then, what do you see as the opportunities are for us as suppliers of print and associated services and software help our customers? Stu, shall I come to you first on this one?
Yeah, you can do a cynical view on this one. Coming from a print management vendor, I have to be very honest. A lot of people talk about print management, for example, and all the features available. Let's be really honest here, 80% of the world are just using it for secure release. You don't use all the other elements around you. They don't use reporting. The industry still hasn't quite fully, in my opinion, really grasped the benefits of capture and workflow and automation. And I think this is the pivot moment potentially for this industry, where the strong will survive and are going to have to adapt, and there will have to be new conversations around it now. And I think looking at who's on this call, I think that's where the likes of Intuitive will now add their value. From a Papercut perspective, we hold mountains of data behind XLS files and CSVs and PDF reports. People don't consume information like that now, and I think it gives vendors the opportunity now to really go and sit down with a customer and go, actually, Mr. Customer, we've got this mountain of data, let's turn it into information, and let's take that information and take actionable business steps off the back of it. Let's understand who is printing what, where, and when, and why. Let's understand who is scanning where and why and how, and really start to identify those opportunities for automation, for digitization of manual processes, and to really start to address as an industry business process, rather than just going, hey, Mr. Customer, here's 30 devices and some print management. I think the world and the industry has to now evolve, and I think this will be the pivot moment that forces that evolution as well.
Yeah, I think you're right, Stu. I think we've been in the print, or looking at with print data for about 2 years, so we're relatively new. I was absolutely astounded by the amount of data that there is, and I think the people who are going to thrive are the people who can use that data to help their customers. So as you mentioned, the first opportunity is really, how can you look at that data and look at that print data for working practices and spotting opportunities for digitization? Because if you think about printing printing is just a manual part of a manual business process. So if you can help customers understand the what and the why of why documents are being printed, you're in a great position to help. And you know, Mark and Mark's company have done some amazing work in this area. You know, and actually there's some real quick wins. You know, we've been into customers and the whole bit, you know, we were in a customer a few weeks ago. They were scanning 30,000 bits of paper a year, didn't even know what that they were doing it, let alone the what and the why. However, I see sort of data going far beyond just automation. I think that's the quick win. We're doing some work with one of our partners, a company called EcoPrintQ in America, and they've got a couple of really interesting projects. They've got one where they're integrating print data with HR data, and they're using that to look at different working practices. So they can look at difference in practices by manager, by office, by department, by cost centre. And there's another project that they're looking at, which is looking at student printing. And for them, what they're looking at is actually, is there a correlation between lecturers or student engagement and what people are doing for what, you know, and learning outcomes? So I think there's lots and lots of opportunities, you know. But I think for me, you've got to start with the data. You've got to be able to collect and analyse the data, and that's where we're going to focus on our efforts with our partners. I mean, Mark, your company's done quite a lot of work in this area.
Yeah, we have, and actually it's been a really interesting learning process, and it's one that we see replayed every day, Roger. And effectively, you move from fragmented static data, you then group that, and you have status reports. You then use dashboards, the sort that Intuitive provide, and they can give you information on everyday things that you need to drive the business, and then you can evolve into pure business intelligence and AI involvement to give you that predictive analytics and make decisions. Now, we originally partnered with Intuitive not to service our own needs. We worked with Intuitive to help provide our customers with information regarding how best to manage their print estate. Either they did it themselves or we did it for them. However, it's now become a core part of what we do, because we now use it to share information internally, and we use it to drive everyday business operations, from sales to order processing, logistics and commissions. And really that information is in the moment and it's real time. And then we move from that and we use it, business intelligence, as a service. And we use that for customers to help predict future outcomes before they happen. So you mentioned their universities. We now have dashboards that can predict when a student will leave a university, and that stimulates a conversation with the education provider to stop that happening. And that's worth millions of pounds worth per year to that university.
That sounds fantastic. And Louella, I think you've got some interesting stats or opinions on, you know, how data-driven companies can perform or outperform.
Yeah, so, you know, it's just it's really interesting to hear what Mark was saying about their DX360 tool. I think that's a really great example of how organisations can get a better understanding of where they are on that digital maturity curve. And our research has shown that data-driven companies consistently outperform their peers that aren't perhaps leveraging or really exploiting data. And, you know, really data analytics can truly drive competitive advantage. And, you know, it's really all about understanding the customer and business processes. And I think, as Stu mentioned, it's about using that data to get insights. So not just information, but actually to drive insights about your business. So it's not just about understanding printing, but actually how those processes can be automated and how that can drive more value for a business as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Louella. So moving on to the next question, which is very related. I'm just thinking about, Mark, maybe some examples of how your organisation have embraced data both internally to improve your internal organisation and productivity, but also, more importantly, I guess, externally in terms of providing a better experience for your customers and delivering great service to them.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned in the last question, we're using data and dashboards to transform ourselves internally and then ultimately to help our customers transform externally. We began the process by integrating into CRM to give better forecasting visibility to the management team and also to our sales teams. But then we realised there was a benefit to linking to our sales order processing team, because that gave that team visibility of sales, and it gave sales visibility of where their order was in the system, which could identify any bottlenecks and improve our customer satisfaction. But then it became perfect sense to link in our logistics team, because then they had visibility of what sales orders were coming down the pipeline, and for the salespeople, they could then let the customer know when the product was going to arrive. So ultimately, in the days when we had stock, we can ensure the right products are ordered at the right time. And I can't overstate the significance of this and the benefits that it will give. And as I said, we'll see more of these when we get through some of the immediate supply chain challenges. And to give this some context, I've now worked for 4 manufacturers, a multi-branded reseller, and a distributor. What we're doing here is paradigm shifting, because it's putting data at the heart of what we're doing. We're transforming ourselves internally, and then ultimately we can give that information or a subset of it to our customers externally.
That's absolutely great, isn't it? And Roger, I think that really ties in with Intuitive's business ethos as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, our whole thing, ethos of the company, was to simplify that whole business intelligence process. So, you know, provide for customers, providing high value, easy to use, quick to deploy solutions that means that they can start to get on that journey quickly. You know, and then for our partners, providing information for them to be able to serve their customers, so allowing them to monitor their printer states, looking at where resources, looking to look at working patterns, and actually monitor it as things change. But, you know, being a data company, as you'd expect, we use data extensively in the business. So, you know, we monitor everything from our sales force forecasting, our partner engagement, you know, our training, completion of partners through training and technical enablement, you know, looking at what features and what functionality, because that's data. So if we understand what people are using, we can improve our product. And, you know, and then we will start to go into benchmarking and looking at cross-organizational data in the future.
That's great. And I think, Stu, you're also looking at data, aren't you, internally on, you know, how you can improve things too?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, I think anyone who's not looking at their own internal business data right now to understand how they can improve is missing a trick. Certainly from us, you know, we look at our own data, you know, whether that be our core home data, you know, we've used to understand what features are being used and how we can develop and enhance those features to adapt to the industry, and how we can therefore reach out to customers who we know are using or big users of specific features to get real world insights into that. You know, so that's obviously really key for us. Clearly, obviously, we've done work with you. You know, a big part of our revenue stream is our annuity stream, our maintenance and support contracts. And, you know, we've done a lot of work with Roger and with our authorized solution centers globally to try and help them get a better understanding, and therefore help our resellers and the OEMs and the vendors in this industry to get a better understanding of their maintenance and support opportunities, and what have they got coming up in the next 90 days, 180 days, what have they missed out on in the last 180 days, and how can they maximize that for the benefit of all as well. And I think, as Roger said, moving forward, I think things like benchmarking, whether that be vertical or horizontal, will present further opportunities for many people in this industry.
Yeah, I think with both of your businesses, that is going to be the next thing. So at the moment, it's providing information. You know, BIs often provide information to make your business more efficient, and I see the next level of information is really about providing cross-organizational information back out to customers. So, you know, both of you as organizations serve across geographies, across markets, across different sizes of organizations. And going into the future, the next generation will be able to use that to allow your customers to get to competitive advantage. And you know, it's early days, but that's certainly some areas that we're starting to invest in terms of product development.
Great, thanks, Roger. Well, my next question was going to be about biggest challenges, but I actually feel like we've covered quite a lot of that ground already. So I'm going to actually ask you all just to think about if you could give one piece of advice for anybody embarking or, you know, sort of completing the next step on their digital transformation journey, what would it be? I'm going to put you on the spot first, Mark.
I think the key thing for me, Catherine, is you have to understand where you are today. It's critically important, because if you don't understand where you are, you can't create a future strategy. And then also, before you embark on this one, read this book, Orchestrating Transformation First. Trust me, that will help.
Brilliant, thank you. What about you, Roger? What would your one piece of advice be?
Yeah, don't try and eat it all at once. Take some small steps, you know, incremental gains, and use the data to drive decisions. You know, don't go for the big BI project. You know, Mark mentioned some of their work with us. You know, that is not a project. That is a one-off project. You know, we've been through 3 or 4 iterations. We look at it, we see what we've learned, we adapt and we change. So small steps and constant review the data to evolve.
Perfect, that's great. What about you, Stu?
Personally, I find digital transformation quite a vague term. You know, ask 10 people and you're going to get 11 different answers. However, for me, the advice piece is simple, and it's have an end goal and understand how you'll measure that. Because if you can't measure something, my question is, how can you manage it? If you don't know where your end goal is, how do you know when you're there or that you're on the right track? You know, so I think those are just 2 really simple things that, you know, I think it's just project 101 stuff.
That's great. Louella, anything to add from you on this one?
No, I just really want to echo what everyone said. It's really about thinking big, starting small, and identifying, you know, one business process potentially that has automation possibilities, and focusing on that first, and then expanding that to other business processes based on success there.
Great. My final question before we come on to some questions from our audience is, what changes have you made personally due to the huge upheaval of the last 2 years? So we've talked a lot about business. I'm interested to find out, you know, is there something that you've all done differently, started doing, stopped doing, just due to all the changes over the last couple of years? Stu, I'm going to come to you first.
I started going to the gym because the biscuit cupboard was much easier to access working from home. If I wanted to do. I tried telling the kids that if the office door was shut, they won't come in. That lasted about 2 days, and I think half of my company and half of the industry have seen my youngest at various points over the past 5 years. So, yeah, adapt to what you can do.
Absolutely. What about you, Louella?
Yeah, so for me, I've worked from home for about 15 years and run Quocirca for that time. So it wasn't a massive change to adapt to working from home, but I think what I have learned is to be stricter about my personal and work boundaries, and I think that's what I've taken. I've really enjoyed the slower pace of life, and you know, it's made me really focus more on, you know, my kind of family time and personal time, not encroaching into my work life.
Yeah, and what about you, Mark?
I've really taken my life back. For years, I've put work ahead of my family and my friends, but now I've made COVID work for me, so I've got an infinitely better work-life balance, albeit I'm keen to continue to improve this and really see how it can evolve, because I've got a better work-life balance, but I do miss the social aspects from work and the different environments that I used to get exposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. And Roger, just to finish off?
Yeah, probably a bit more of the same. Certainly taking a bit of time out, learning to take a bit of workout time for myself. So that's either been fitness. So I'm a rugby referee, and I've got to referee at a higher level. And recently I've taken up cooking because I was, you know, running around, grabbing the wrong food at the right time and taking a break. And I think, I tell you, I've been far more conscious of people, and I'm thinking about personal pressures that, you know, you do. We've also, as Stu said, I've met Stu's kids on numerous occasions on Zoom calls, and you know, you start to sort of understand the people you're dealing with a lot more, rather than just thinking of them as a business relationship.
Yeah, so I think it's been a really tough time for everybody in lots of different ways and different circumstances, but hopefully some positives to come out of it as well, which is really nice to hear. Maybe we all get work in a little bit more focus and get that balance right, which is really good to hear. So we have had a few questions come in on the question and answer panel. So I'm just going to have a quick look at these and just throw some of these in, and I suggest I'll ask you all and see who would like to take the question. So there's been a question about, in discussions on additional workflow, such as capture, how do you bridge the discussion regarding print, which is typically, I guess, an IT conversation, to the business units or the departments that might drive workflow?
Okay. I'll take that one to start, Catherine. I think it's about following the journey of that document and understanding that printed document is printed for a reason, and understanding the reason that it's done. So we've had examples of one company where we saw lots of documents being printed out by HR, and actually when we went and analysed them, we found they were holiday forms which are all doing manually, which has now been automated. Or looking at how some of the, we've started to look at why people were taking reports out of the data. And example from a council was they wanted to look at the data by cost centre. That then went, we did that and produced an automated report for the finance department. We then got started to the finance department, and we met the finance director, and then we started talking about a big business change project that they got. So I think it's focusing on looking at why documents are printed and what is the process in which they're printed, rather than just looking at the traditional, whether it's a colour or it's a black and white, or it's not always, printing can be a good thing.
Yeah, I guess it's that sort of data discovery, isn't it, and seeing where that leads you. So understanding and having a look at what that's showing you, and then where that leads in terms of process within the business, and going off on those exploration trips almost. Anybody else have anything that they'd like to add in on that, or shall I pick another question from the list for you?
Let's move on over.
Sorry, go on, Stu.
No, I was going to say let's pick another one. Let's go.
Okay, so I think this is a great question. As business owners, have you seen an increase in productivity due to hybrid working? So has it helped you to grow and develop your business?
Well, I can answer that for my business, because I work from home, and a lot of the people who work for me all work from home as well. And actually, it did allow me to adapt to the business very quickly, because there's a lot of flexibility already there. So, I've haven't worked in an office, actual physical office, for a long time. So from my perspective, productivity, but I think there's always a danger, because even in our research, it shows that people say they're more productive working from home, but actually they tend to work longer hours, and their view of how productive they are is very different to perhaps their productivity and the view of their managers. So I think it's difficult for people to self-report on their productivity sometimes.
That's great, thanks, Louella.
Yeah, Catherine, with our business in the print space has doubled. So working from home, working digitally, from a transactional point of view and reviews, has made us a lot more efficient. But from a product point of view and from a creative point of view, lots harder. And that's where I think the office has really come back into play for us.
Yeah, and I can't give you a definitive answer to the question. One thing I can say is it's made you think a hell of a lot more about jumping in the car or going on the train and the underground to an appointment, and how much dead time you're going to have.
Absolutely. In fact, there's a comment in the chat which I will just read out actually. My wife is a nurse, an NHS nurse, and her use of Teams has grown. But her trust used to use it before the pandemic. They didn't use it before the pandemic, but they've got there now. She now does her training remotely, and it offers a nice choice to driving 100 miles to do an hour-long session. So yeah, absolutely. I think we're all a little bit more thoughtful, aren't we, about the wasted time of travel and whether we can achieve stuff more effectively, online. Well, I think we've just about run out of time, and I'm conscious people are probably going to be wanting to get off to the next meeting or appointment. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone who's attended today, particularly to our 4 panelists for what I think has been a really interesting conversation and discussion, and some really thoughtful points that have been made. We will be sending a follow-up email out to all registered attendees with a link to the recording of the session. So if you didn't manage to join today, there's still a chance to watch. There will be a short survey when you exit, when we shut the webinar at the end. Literally 3 very simple questions. Please give us your feedback on that. It allows us to improve and hopefully might give us some food for thought for future topics as well. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you very much again, and look forward to seeing you all again on another one of these events soon. Thank you.